Okay, try again. Sorry about that. Magic movies or movies of the Archon God. This is just a follow-up of an abbreviated version of the one I did before, which is far too long for everyone. I realise that. Now, the magic movies, or the magic of movies, really, if you like. Look, putting it very clearly, um, all movies are the truth. All movies show you the reality of your world. If you want to find a quick way, as I've said before, to get to what your real world is, in many ways, the quickest and easiest and most enjoyable way to do that is to watch movies. They represent the world that we think is a possibility but already exists and will exist too, for that matter, because everything is always planned. The Archon God plans everything and sets things in motion because it's a false reality we live in. It's his reality in the sense that he creates everything in it, not not at a real physical level, but sets up everything that is in it, sets up every situation, every occurrence, everything that is in my environment is set up. It is part of the matrix and part of the Archon God's domain. We operate and create in it as human beings, but we really are operating and creating for the God, not for ourselves. We don't, it's a bit like, yes, we only work and create and do everything for the Archon God. We don't actually do it for ourselves. We think we do it for ourselves in the sense that our survival here depends on it. But that's really the deception of it, because it's not really to our benefit in the long run, because it's not our domain and it's not our world. So it's creating for someone else. But at any rate, the movies. Yes, I mentioned this, a couple of movies in the last thing. I'm just trying to remember. First one, of course, is the Matrix, because that's what we live in. We live in a matrix. A matrix is an artificial world, a system world, a world that is not natural, that doesn't just randomly occur and where humans manipulate and make it what it is. No, it's already set up. Everything in it is set up. Everything in it, even humans that operate in it, are essentially working for the matrix, shall we say, operating for the matrix, just like society really does that in a way, like we operate and we combine with authorities and different other things. It's not like you just individually create your little world. You don't. It's a world that's already largely created for you from the day you're born, and you adapt to it. And that's but it's a totally, if it really comes down to it, and the matrix is very, 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 it's not real in any way, almost. My mind is not very clear on this at this very second, but there's really nothing in it that, there's nothing in it that is benefiting human beings really at all. They're living in a world that is the exact reverse of what is beneficial to them. All of them are like that. Every human being and every living thing that is on this earth is really not working to benefit themselves. Um, some of them think they are, but I would doubt it in a way. And that would depend on your beliefs and what you think is the real truth. And this is the thing, is what is the truth? It's like, in other words, what do you really think is the real truth of being human, or of what your existence is, where you come from, what you are, what you're meant to be, and what you're meant to be serving. Um, it's all a choice, really. This is what I've said before, and this is true of all of us. Every day, from the littlest to the biggest things, we're making choices. We don't think that it's important, but it it decides our future and the whole world's future. Sorry about that, but this is because you have to be given choices. I've said before, that is how the world works. But if you are given, if the information you receive in order to make your choices is not really beneficial to you, or is not the full correct version of what is good information, shall we say, um, in other words, it's not a bottom line truth. If there is such a thing in this reality, I do not think there is very much of that in this reality, because it is all fake. And when I say fake, I mean it's not really real, because if something is set up and it's set up as a playing field for the Archon God, shall we say, then it's not really real. You're playing again. You're playing and you don't know you're playing, as I've said before, and it's not a game you can really win, because if you don't know you're in a game, you don't even know you're playing, and you certainly don't know that there's any sort of competition going on. And in reality, humans are competing against themselves, but they're also competing against um, the God is playing against them too, because he enjoys interacting and playing in this world. He doesn't directly do that with most of us, but he's the mastermind behind everything that goes on, if you want to look at it that way. Um, but I won't go into that too much, because it becomes complicated. But like I say, it is a choice that, but most humans probably are making the choices but don't even know what choices they're making, because even the entity itself, like, I haven't seen him. I only see the results of his work, but I don't actually see him. The Archon is a term. I have not seen these beings, okay? So I can't say what their true form is. I believe they can change form, but that is because if you have vast technology, you can do these things, I would imagine. But there could be an authentic form under it all, I don't know. It is said that the Archon race, or that terminology, are a group of beings that have a reptilian type ancestry. Um, but there's also a humanoid quality, which was part of intervention at some point with some human beings or whatever. I do not know all the details of this. If I find them out, in other words, if I get information and it rings true for me, I will pass that on. but it has to ring true for me. Sometimes I get information and I believe half of it, but I say I don't think that's the whole story. And that's largely where I am at, in a way, with most of what I would say. I believe what I say about humans, but not necessarily do I understand fully the Archon, the God, and that full thing. I have a conception of it, but like I say, I have not interacted with these beings. I have not seen them. Some people have. You have to, but I know that there is the existence of these beings. I know there is the existence of the Archon God. What the name of this being would be, I'm not saying at this point because I'm not 100% sure, but it probably doesn't really matter at this point because you know, it's just, they're all just terms and names anyway. And down through the ages, I believe that a lot of these entities have gone under different titles, but it's still the same entities. It's still the same God. The God is the head leader of the Archon collective, you could say, I suppose. Exactly what it completely entails, I'm not sure, of course. But you might be able to get details of this from other sites and other people because it is there. I have not studied these things for years like most people. I just pick the main bits that I know or believe to be true and put them together and say, well, this is the picture I'm now forming, and the rest would just be what I would personally know from experience. Without that, I would not probably believe any of it, like most people, and this is the thing. So you do have to have, I think, that personal experience element to actually go along that line, especially if you have very much been in this real world to where you believe that it is all that it appears to be and nothing more. And also that you believe every bit of information you get, even though it would be pretty, I would be pretty honest in saying that most of my life I would have received very little information and not even sought even information out, even if it was there. So we're all limited in that respect because the more information, the more you go into things, of course, the more you're going to know, and that will either substantiate or change your mind about some detail. Whether it changes your mind about the whole picture, that is a different matter. That would probably be unlikely, but the details still have relevance. But at any rate, the magic movies. The Matrix, as I say, the first one. We live in a matrix, an artificial construct of which we have lost dominion over, and more so because the actual domain now is not natural like it used to be. It's all artificial because it's all Wi-Fi technology and stuff and computers, and that is a frequency that runs over the whole planet and therefore interacts with the humans because everything is frequency and vibration. Yes, so that means that the ability for the matrix to even more interact with humans is now much, much greater than what it has ever been in our known history, shall we say. That's how I would see it, and how I would just see it from my own personal experience in my lifetime, because you know, we didn't have this if you go back 40 years even, you know. And the longer you've lived, the more you have that comparison. If you're born into it, you've got no comparison. And you know, you only have then a history, and that may or may not give you a good picture. But anyway, the Matrix movie, the They Live movie, the Prometheus movie, Prometheus, I'm trying to say it. The Blade Runner movie, and I'm going to throw in another movie which only just occurred to me just today, even though it's not a science fiction movie. But I'm going to throw in a movie called The Crying Game, which was around, which I saw many years ago. And I'm just throwing that into the mix because the world now is very much all those other movies. That is the reality. But we also have this personal element coming in now with at a personal level for humans about what they think about themselves as a human being, and even what they think about their physical demeanour, and about uh, who they are attracted to, etc., all that sort of thing, which is something that I don't normally go into because I pretty much left a fair bit of that behind. But in the artificial world of movies, yes, I will entertain all these things. Then that becomes a reality. The love stories, the science fiction, mainly the human interactions in movies, because even in the, even in your science fiction type movies, like in Blade Runner, you still have the main characters. You have so-called love stories with all these movies, um, and you have characters. But all these movies, if you combine them all, so I'd recommend that you watch them all if you haven't already, and you combine them, you're going to get a picture of what this world really is, I would think. And all those movies do over, there's many other movies too, by the way, that you could add, because I have not seen all the science fiction movies. I'm saying that it probably gets much more complicated and more what you'd call bizarre in what we would think is real if you watched even more of the newer ones and more recent ones, because these movies are quite simple, even though they are still appear to be far-fetched, um, in comparison with maybe some other ones, but they're all the same thing in the sense that they all show you that your world is not what you think it is. It is not a simple little planet place where humans are driving their cars and only in recent times went into technology with the computer and the mobile phone, etc. Those movies show you that what is your real reality is completely out of your scope and completely something that you don't think would or could ever exist, or if it did, it would be so far into the future. Whereas I think that if you think about even the computer that we have now, that is a reality, this is like the primitive version of what will happen with all those movies. The technology that is already there, but that we don't see because we are kept separate from all of this, because we're meant to play in this artificial reality and play at a primitive level. And that also keeps us very limited in a way. And we seem to almost be comfortable with that. But I think what we don't realise is that It's a bit like in that Blade Runner movie, right? The fella, the main character in that, is really so busy playing in the reality that's around him, chasing other human beings, thinking that they are less human than him, and only to discover at the end of the movie that he possibly is no different to them, that he is, if he is human, or at least what he perceives to be human, then he is really eliminating other human beings. And if he is like in the movie, they're called replicants. They're like synthetic human beings, but for all practical purposes, they look human and they interact the same way, and in many ways they have the emotions and stuff of humans. I'm not quite sure why that is, but maybe because they have mingled with humans for so long, maybe they have developed those traits. That could be it. I don't know. I'm not sure. You'd have to, because the movie doesn't really explain that. But they do appear to be just as human as what you would, and more human than the main fella, as I've said, that was eliminating them. But whichever way you look at it, the irony is that the word of it is that in the end he's essentially killing off his own kind unknowingly, thinking that he's doing something else. And this is the thing, and this is how this world does work. Whichever way you look at it, humans do kill off their own kind, do kill off one another. Um, they might justify it, but they do that, as he justified it in the movie. But of course, he didn't even think he was killing off humans. But he should have really sensed that he was doing um, something that he should have probably thought a bit more about anyway, because whether they were human or not, it's still like only a variance, like, and that's, it was still life, and he could see that they were more human than him, or he should have been able to see that. So, but anyway, that's me rambling. But and the reason I thrown in the last movie, The Crying Game, even though I should really see it straight away to talk on it because I haven't seen it for so long. But I throw it in because of, like I say, because it's not just about being human anymore. It's also being about, I think we're now having to look at what we even are, if we, what we are as a human being. Like, are we human? Not in the sense that are we human, but we are now redefining what it is to be human, what your identity is. If you look at it that way, and that movie does throw light on that point of the physical. How should I say? I don't like to go into these things too much in a way. It's not something, because I always say we're spiritual beings in a physical body. Our thought creates reality, and we're all connected. That's the bottom line thing of what the human being originally was supposed to be, and should be, and should have been, and most aren't now. But they've gone further and further away from developing their true self and their true abilities. But in that movie, yes, that element of, because you're talking about, a man who falls in love with a woman only to discover that it's not a female, and then faced and if he had seen himself as a man that would only go with a female, then he had to question his own, I suppose he would have had to question his own identity or what, or I suppose the bottom line of that movie was kind of saying it doesn't matter as long as if you love that person, that type of thing. Now, this is an interesting point, and this is something that each person would have to, yes, decide for themselves, I suppose. But at the same time, I think that to be, if the movie serves me correct, you know, the male in it, fell in love with the female, but he thought he was falling in love with a female because the female did not tell the male that she was really a male. You know, she looked like a female, but she wasn't a female. So there was a facade there, and she did not tell the fellow that she was a male until after the fellow had already been seduced and fell in love with her. And and the movie was just going on along these lines, and and I guess we're supposed to make of it what we will. And eventually, of course, look, there's many more elements to this movie. It's well worth a watch. Um, and the same with all these movies. There's so many things in them that you could talk for 100 years about them because there's a lot of stuff in them. And I would prefer to have seen them yesterday before I even go in because I'm going on memory. I'm talking about very vague issues here, and I am being airy-fairy like I sometimes am. But I would recommend you watch all these movies and try to place it into our reality now and say, what relevance is this now to our world now? All these movies, where do they fit in, and why were these movies made? These movies are made to show you the truth, I say. They are the magic movies of the Archon God. He has to show humans the truth, and he shows them their reality, which is the truth. In other words, the truth is the reality, okay, the true reality. When I say truth, I mean reality. But we think that what we live in is reality, but it's not really reality because we don't see it for what it is, so therefore it's not really true. It's really a false reality. It is like in the movie The Crying Game, where the fella falls in love with the beautiful female, but the beautiful female is a male. And this world we live in is very much like that. What we think we like and what we think is good or bad is really all twisted round. It's a reverse world and it's a duality world. The God himself is duality. He operates in duality. He doesn't operate just in one. He doesn't just operate in love, he operates in love and hate. And he oscillates between the two quickly sometimes. And he gets humans into that mode too. Humans operate that same way. Why this is for you to figure out or to say, like I've said before, whether you go along with intervention, whether you say that we were always like this, always duality, always love-hate, always this, or whether these are things that have gradually evolved down through the years due to intervention, because clearly if you have intervention or you breed with something different, of course you are going to have a different type of human. You are going to have a different species. That's, and whether that is better or worse, or more evolved or less evolved, but certainly it's different. It's not going to be the same as what was. Now, I'm not going to go into that either, but that's because I think I've done that before. But those movies, they put all these things to you, is what I'm saying. You're supposed to think about these things, and most people would have thought about some of those movies because they are very interesting movies. Now, the last one I threw in just recently because, yeah, it's a personal one, and in a sense that it's talking about how we are seeing one another now. And if you look at even human beings, like we always saw ourselves a certain way, and now we're starting to see ourselves a different way. Like in that movie, the man in it had his whole reality turned around, and so he was a man who only would have loved a female at that level, shall we say. But due to being seduced by a female that was really a man underneath all the facade, shall we say, the makeup and all that, it was still essentially a male. And, so then he was faced with having that dilemma in his mind. This is what we have in this world. We're always in a dilemma. Whereas before, like he would have just, if he had not been put in that position, because he probably shouldn't have been put in that position really, because if he wouldn't have went up to that lady and got involved with her, the woman, if he knew that it was a male in the first place, because that would have went against his identity, I would imagine. And that was the conflict that he then had, and he had to decide, should I continue to love this person, even though it is not what I thought? And I suppose he had to ask himself many questions. As the movie went, he continued to go for it and made the choice that he was going to love that. In fact, he actually sacrificed quite a lot for the love of an individual who was not what he thought was originally. And so because he did sacrifice, not he didn't just love that individual as I remember it. He did actually end up sacrificing quite a bit of his life for even that love of something that was not what he originally thought. So it was very interesting movie and very complicated, and something for people to think about, and throwing it into all those other movies that we are in a total mind deception world in every single way. And the Archon God shows you his very deception, his very fake world. He shows you that you're in a fake world, but we do not believe that. We don't look at the movies and say, hey, oh, perhaps this is really the real reality. This is the real technology. This is what really can go on. This is what could be in our reality, but it's not. This has to be shown. And you have to say to yourself, there's no reason that that I like. I mean, obviously, I'm not a script writer or a movie director or a movie. What's the word? The people that make up all the movies. You say, well, those people have a lot more imagination than you and I. And look, they are creative people, and they do have the ability to write good scripts, etc., and to visualize and to put in onto a piece of celluloid what you would call a piece of fantasy. But in reality, I would suggest that the Archon God and his uh, many followers, etc., look, they put the truth there in the movies. The movie makers don't just make it up, they merely interpret it. They merely interpret what they already know or what the information they've received and put it onto celluloid to show you the truth, to show you what your reality really is and what really goes on and what is really the potential and where you could be headed. And, apart from the last movie, most of those movies show technology and science and things that are beyond what myself and most um, people would think is possible. Even though, as I've said before in other videos, we have know that most of this is possible because we're actually told even by not movie makers, but just by science people and stuff that yes, we can create all different things. They have that technology now. They say they don't, but all they do is say that it hasn't actually been put into practice. But the science is already there. It's not like that is science fiction, that some of the things even in those movies are not possible. Even science will tell you that they can do them now. And I won't go into details about what those things are. Just look at the movies and then look up your science. And like I say, as everyone knows, we had Dolly the sheep cloned long, long, long time ago. And there again, they don't do that till they've finally perfected it. So, or they've probably been doing it for years before they show it, because everything is usually at least 10 years behind before you get something. And then you're probably looking at 60 to 100 years behind what is actually in reality. And that's just at our level. That's not at the technology level of the Archon God or these interdimensional beings. They are what you'd call, got to go.